Today on the podcast, the Gilded Age of America, Wealth, Corruption, and Change. We're going to go back to 1877 through 1898 and talk about some factual and historically accurate information about the Gilded Age. Supposedly, if you've watched the news, read the headlines, 2025 is a rebirth of that Gilded Age. Some in certain offices would like to bring that same dynamic back to our existence and awareness. And so I figured it'd be good to find out what the actual Gilded Age was like. What can we expect of the future? So let's go back to 1877 through 1898 and talk about the foundations of capitalism that we have today.
Welcome to Everything with Everett. This is a talk show podcast hosted by Everett McConaughey. The purpose of this production is to share thoughts, voices, and information to further a discussion on who we are as individuals, communities, and a global society. Everything with Everett is open to all topics of discussion: faith, science, history, finances, social issues, and, well, everything. Be sure to follow, like, and subscribe. Visit everettpodcast.com for all the details.
So I will be linking to this article that, again, you know it, ChatGPT wrote it. I asked them to cite sources for some key data that they pulled for this. So I'm going to attach a link to this podcast episode. I believe there's an option you can hit, like the site specific URL in your player for the podcast, and it should take you to what it wrote, and you can look at those cited sources as well. So without further ado, let's dive into the Gilded Age of America, Wealth, Corruption, and Change. The Gilded Age, roughly 1877 through 1898, was a period of rapid economic growth, industrialization, and wealth accumulation in the United States. It was named after The Gilded Age, A Tale of Today, 1873, a novel by Mark Twain and Charles Dudley Warner, which satirized the era's materialism and deep social inequalities. Beneath the glittering surface of prosperity lay significant political corruption, poverty, and labor struggles. How did the Gilded Age begin? The Gilded Age emerged in the wake of the Reconstruction era from 1865 through 1877, following the Civil War. With an expansion of railroads, the rise of heavy industry, and an influx of immigrants to the U.S. economy boomed, and several key factors fueled this growth. Industrialization. The expansion of steel, oil, and manufacturing industries created massive wealth. The U.S. became the world's leading producer of steel, surpassing Britain, Germany, and France combined. And that source is the historyjunkie.com. Railroad expansion. The completion of the first transcontinental railroad in 1869 revolutionized transportation and commerce, linking the country's coasts. Innovation and inventions. Over 500,000 patents were issued between 1860 and 1890. Major inventors like Thomas Edison, electricity and phonograph, George Westinghouse, train air brakes, and John D. Rockefeller, Standard Oil. Immigration boom. About 10 million European immigrants arrived during the Gilded Age, seeking better opportunities. Many settled in rapidly growing cities, fueling industrial labor. Now let's look at who benefited the most from this Gilded Age. The greatest winners of the Gilded Age were wealthy industrialists, business magnates, and financiers. Robber barons versus captains of industry. Figures like John D. Rockefeller of Standard Oil, Andrew Carnegie, Carnegie Steel, J.P. Morgan Finance, and Cornelius Vanderbilt Railroads amassed immense fortunes. While some viewed them as ruthless monopolists, others saw them as visionary entrepreneurs. The urban middle class, educated professionals, engineers, and entrepreneurs saw their wages and standards of living improve. The middle class grew as businesses expanded. Technology and urban growth. Innovations such as electric streetlights, skyscrapers, and subways transformed cities. Telephones improved communication, and mass production made consumer goods more affordable. Who was harmed the most? While industrialists prospered, many groups suffered under the inequalities of the Gilded Age. Factory workers and immigrants. Industrial laborers worked long hours, often 12 to 16 hours a day, in dangerous conditions for low wages. Sweatshops and tenement housing led to overcrowded and unsanitary living conditions. Farmers. Many farmers faced falling crop prices, rising debt, and high railroad fees for transporting goods. This led to the rise of the populist movement demanding economic reforms. The African American population. After Reconstruction ended in 1877, Southern black Americans lost voting rights and were subjected to Jim Crow segregation. Racial violence, including lynchings, surged in the 1890s. And Native Americans. Western expansion led to the violent conflicts with Native American tribes, forcing them onto reservations. The Dawes Act of 1887 attempted to assimilate them into American society, often at great cost. How did the Gilded Age end? The Gilded Age ended with the Panic of 1893, a severe economic depression that lasted until 1897. The crisis led to widespread bank failures, business collapses, and high unemployment. Politically, it resulted in the election of William McKinley in 1896, ushering in the Progressive Era, which aimed to curb monopolies, improve labor conditions, and reform corruption. What is the legacy of the Gilded Age? The Gilded Age set the stage for modern capitalism, but it also highlighted extreme economic disparities and social injustices. Its excess prompted later reforms such as the antitrust laws, labor protections, and women's suffrage movements. Many of today's economic and political debates, income inequality, corporate power, and immigration, trace their roots to the pivotal era in American history. And it's asking me a question, which I'm glad that I stopped and didn't just read that. So, anywho, if you want more information, that should hopefully pique your interest to dive into your own search about learning about the Gilded Age, who benefited, and honestly, you know, it sounds like a nice present under the Christmas tree, but I'm sure it's just going to be socks for you poor little people. Because, you know, the people that live in the Gilded Age already have the gold toilets at Mar-a-Lago, you know. Anywho, so the more you know, pass it around, tell your friends, and I will catch you on the next one. Have a good one.
Thank you for listening to Everything with Everett. Connect with Everett and other listeners on Facebook and Twitter at Everett Podcast. Everett would love to hear from you. Share your thoughts by emailing mystory@everettpodcast.com. You can also leave a voicemail or send a text message to 208-391-2808. Choose to listen, speak with kindness, and have a great day.